Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's International Politics with Sasha, which is myself. And let me start right away with the introduction of my esteemed guest, the retired Colonel Leighton General Chris Greco. Please welcome to the show. How are you today, Chris? Hello.
I'm doing fine. How you doing,
Okay.
Sasha? How's
Good.
things?
Good. Could have been better, of course, but
Yes, yes.
let's talk about something. I would like to ask you what business had England to risk a war with Hitler in 1939? It had agreement as France to defend Poland if attacked by Germans. What what actually England was trying to accomplish? Why did they need it?
Well,
What's
I
your
think I think that you have to remember, and you do. I mean, you don't remember World War One, but basically, I mean, you remember the history behind it, and England took a terrible cost from World War One. The Americans kind of put an expeditionary force in there. We flew some planes. We did some trench warfare. We did type thing, but it never really hit our country. It hit the British badly, really badly. And I think that Neville Chamberlain was really trying to stop any possibility that that people would actually go to war again. And he felt that diplomacy was really high in his area. But I'm going to tell you that if you read the book, and Malcolm Gladwell does a great job of this, it says talking to strangers, what we should know about people we don't know. And in that book, he states that Chamberlain met with Hitler a number of times. And he felt that Hitler was a peaceful individual, that he would never, ever, invade Poland, that he wouldn't do those things that need to be done, that everything is good, peace in our time, came back with a piece of paper. Hey, Hitler signed this thing. We are good to go. He's not, we gave him the Sudetenland. He's not going to go any further and whatever else. In the meantime, when he left and Churchill came in, Churchill said he never met with Hitler, but he knew in his mind what Hitler was going to be like. And you have to remember also, and this is really interesting from a military standpoint. In 1937, and the thing was, what amazed me was the people, the Americans that actually went over to Hitler and said, wow, this guy's really fantastic. One of the Americans was the first man to solo across the Atlantic. He went over there and said, oh, this Luftwaffe is fantastic. It's great. He's put a great Air Force into play, and then he came back and he told the Americans, hey, this guy's got a great Air Force. You need to do something here from the Air Force if we ever come in contact with this individual. Well, in 1937, the Spanish Civil War was taking place. Francisco Franco against the Basques. And they enlisted the help of Hitler and his Luftwaffe. The Luftwaffe did many of their blitzkrieg tactics in the Spanish Civil War. One of those, and in fact, it was funny because the Germans used to literally put a bucket underneath their bombers, and the bombardier, the observer, would sit in that bucket while they were doing bombing runs and report to the pilot about what was going on. So they could actually make very, very specific bombing runs on Spanish towns. And the one bombing run that they did was a firestorm called Guernica. In fact, Picasso did a painting of it, Guernica, and they destroyed that entire town. I mean, they killed they killed or maimed everybody in that town. He knew exactly what the situation was from the standpoint of being able to make that happen. The British, for whatever reason, I don't know why they just counted all of that. I don't know. It was kind of like, no, but he's still a good guy. He's still not going to do anything. He's a strong leader. Germany needed him. Look at how well they're doing. And I will bet you at that point in time, they were doing trade with Germany. So they didn't want to screw up that trade. Does that sound familiar? They didn't want to screw up that trade. So it's kind of like, look, we all want peace here, want a peaceful Europe. The British are going to go in. We're going to, we're not going to have a problem. When they took Poland, it was an absolute shock to everybody in Britain. And there was nothing they could do but sit there and say, we cannot stand for this, and move on. And
who was, just one detail, who
Sure.
else invaded Poland just 2 weeks after Germans?
Stalin. Stalin did from the east side.
So from September 39 to June 22nd, 1941, Stalin and Soviet Union was on the side of Germans. Would
That's
that
correct.
be clear? Any objections to that?
Well, oh yes. Well, the thing was, let me tell you something, and let me tell you something, and you'll understand this. The separation between far right fascism and far left communism is about this much. That when you get to that much of a far right and far left, they almost meet. And I think Stalin looked at it as being, hey, we don't have anything against Hitler. If he wants to take over all of Europe, we don't care. But we want our share. So when he said he was going to go into Poland, we'll attack from the right hand, from the east side, and we'll just go ahead and take them. And it's just amazing to me how that happened. But they thought alike. It was kind of like, as long as we get something for this, that's fine. Until Operation Barbarossa, and then all of a sudden, Hitler just turned on this guy and thought he was going to get to Moscow within a certain period of time.
And do you know, Chris, do you know why he turned to Plan Barbarossa and all of a sudden neglected the peaceful agreement with Stalin?
Oh, he needed oil. He needed oil in the Caucasus Mountains, in the Caucasian area, in the Caucasus.
But he needed oil in 1938 and 39 and 40, but only in June 2041 he started war against Russia. He conceived that plan in December of 1940. So why not before?
Oh, sure.
Why only in 1940? The oil, he always needed oil, but only in December of 1940 he came to the conclusion that he has to defeat Russia.
Yeah,
while still fighting England.
Well, you got to remember, he's trying to get into France. He's into France at this point in time. So 1940, he's pretty much into France. He's going into France. He knows he's going to do that. So he's pushing his troops to the west. I think he was scared that Stalin was going to turn on him, and Stalin was going to start pushing in from the east, and then all of a sudden he was going to have to put up with the Soviets on the east side and the Allies on the western side. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to put up.
At that time, he already occupied France, and there were no any threats from France. Now, with English was different story. And Hitler was absolutely impressed with the resolve of British to fight him, and especially he couldn't figure out this fight in English skies, where Hitler had an army of Messerschmitts, which were superior planes at the time, and they attacked England, and they were killing so many Spitfires. And yet British were able to produce more and more and more, and every day more and more. Actually, they were producing more Spitfires than they were being shot down by Germans. And remember, in October, he stopped this attack on England. And he started to think that there must be a reason. The English are very practical people. Why would they fight such a fight against us unless they have a plan with Stalin, that at certain time Stalin will indeed attack Germany, and that's how English will win the war. and he started to prepare in December of 1940. He started to prepare detailed plan Barbarossa of invading Russia and so on. Now, it's not suddenly that I'm asking this question, because remember his pretense on occupying Sudetenland was the Germans are as ununited people in the world, and we have to help them to unite, to become one people, like they always were. Did you listen to Putin's speech
Yes. Well,
Monday?
yeah. What he
Didn't he
talked about.
say that the Russians are divided people and people are taking advantage of the Russians and they have to do something to unite, to stand their rights, or so on? Didn't Hitler said very similar thing in 1938?
Well, it's called Liebestraum, right? We need
Yes,
living
absolutely
space.
right.
We need
Yeah,
living space to be able
absolutely.
to to understand how we are so confined within these borders. We have to move out and inclusion, right? We have to include people that were German, the Austrians, we need to do that. We need to bring people into our living space and share with them our living space. That, the Lebensraum thing. So I mean, it was very. If you will, I mean, I have downloaded many of the speeches that Hitler did, and what I've done is, since I'm a data analyst, I have put them through what they call a word cloud. So I put the speeches through a word cloud, and what I would do is I would this word cloud. In fact, I should show it to you. I'll try to see if I can bring one up for the next time we talk. But it shows all the different words that are being used the most in his speeches, and there is such a difference between the word cloud of his speech in 1937, 1938, and then all of a sudden 1939 he changed, and a lot of the words used have to do with nationalism, has to do with Germany, has to do with people, German people, national people, Jewish, Jew, a lot of the things in there. So when you take a look at that, all of a sudden you realize his whole theme of speech making changed with he was making German policy as he spoke in those speeches. And that's what a dictator does. I mean, Mussolini did it. In fact, it's funny. A lot of people think that Mussolini based a lot of this stuff on Hitler. Hitler loved Mussolini. Hitler saw what Mussolini did in Italy and basically mirrored that in Germany. He saw and so that's why him and Mussolini, even though Mussolini at the end basically, went down the tubes, he rescued him off of a prison, off of a cliff prison with German special forces and everything else, because he really admired this guy. The funny thing is, Sasha, this is a story that you'll appreciate, and it goes back to Putin, really. But Mussolini had he was he was at I think it was the University of Milan, and this is not apocryphal. This is actually true. He was going for a PhD. He was going for a doctorate, and his doctorate was on fascism. Different aspects of fascism. And he went before the doctorate before he became the dictator of Italy. And he said, "Look, I want to get my PhD." They said, "No, we're not going to. Your dissertation is junk. We're not going to give you a PhD, whatever else." He became, Il Duce. He got the people that sat on his board and had them shot, and then he made another board. And guess what happened? He got his PhD. He actually had it awarded with the people that saw the other people shot, and they went in. They said, great, bene, va bene, and they gave him the PhD. So it's amazing how you can make things happen when you're the person who's in charge and can end up shooting people. And I think that's where we get back to Putin, where he's sitting back saying, I can have these 1,800 people sit outside the Kremlin or whatever, sit outside, Saint Barth. What's the name of the church that right beside the Kremlin? Saint
Basilic.
Saint Basilico. So Saint Basil, and they can do whatever they want. Bottom line is, we'll have them arrested, and that'll be it. But you notice where people are protesting is in the Russian embassies of all these other countries. And it's funny because it doesn't make any difference to Putin. He sits there and laughs at that. It's like, fine, you want to sit outside our embassy and have a bunch of signs that says Putin get out and whatever else. I was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize by the, by the Russian parliament. What are you saying here? I'm just trying to bring it all together. I'm trying to bring us all together. I'm trying to make that living space thing going. So you're right. You're right, Sasha. Go back. If people would just go back in history and see this. Sudetenland. But if you say Sudetenland to half the kids here in the United States, they're going to say, what are you talking about? You say Hitler, they go, oh yeah, Hitler. Yeah, I know Hitler. Yeah, that's some of the Republicans that are sitting around, here. But I don't understand Sudetenland.
But nevertheless, my question was, what drew England to a war against Hitler because of Poland? So fine, so Hitler invaded Poland, and so Russians invaded Poland from another end 2 weeks later. So Poland was no longer an independent country by the end of September 1939.
Yeah.
So England is still not involved in war. It declared the war because of its pact with Poland, which Poland already didn't exist even as a country at the time. What made England fight Germany?
Oh,
just Poland?
No, they could see. No, I'll tell you, there were enough people in the British Isles that could see what was happening. They could see that this was an invasion of a sovereign nation. I think sometimes we forget that. And I got up this morning, and I got to tell you, my wife said, what's wrong? And I said, I'm really upset here. And I was almost on the verge of crying. Do you know why? Because I could see the destruction that Russia did on Ukraine. And the thing I think about is the kids, the children, of all those areas. And I'll tell you something else that Hitler did at that time. He started gathering up the Polish Jews, and he started to bring them together. He started to, put them into the Warsaw ghettos and whatever else, started separating them out, so that he could do whatever he wanted to with them later on. And that may be what urged the British to get involved. But other than that, I don't have a guess. I would have just felt, look, you invade a country, we're going to be involved.
Okay, so British, you understand that every war, it's a lot of suffering, the human suffering, the financial suffering, the all kinds of suffering that there are. And you believe that England wanted to fight Germany because he rounded some Jews in Poland? Do you think it's a credible explanation?
I think they saw what was going on.
if he wouldn't round the Polish Jews, you think England wouldn't go for war?
No, they would have gone in. I think that was kind of like, it wasn't a final straw, but it was kind of like, enough is enough. We've given this guy Sudetenland. He said he was going to be peaceful. He wasn't going to mess around anymore. They appeased him, and he just said, something, I'm going into Poland. And that was it with that. I think the British felt, I'll tell you what, I've dealt with UK. I've dealt with the UK, and I've dealt with UK forces. And let me tell you something about the UK. The UK feels that they're kind of the English overall look. They're like the overarching father figure of Europe. Like, they're sitting in an island, but they're not part of continental Europe, but they're European. So they're the power. They're the empire. And no matter how much they say they're not, they've always come upon that situation. So it's an idea that we have that British Isle thing going, and they wanted to protect Europe, and they saw that Germany was bullying Poland, and they had enough of it. So they just said, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start putting our foot down. We're going to go in there, and we're going to start, and it was funny because you talk about the Spitfire, and you talk about, they had the Lancaster bomber, which was really, really a good bomber. Let me tell you, the Lancaster bomber was amazing. And especially when they converted it to be a dam buster, that was an amazing feat of engineering that people do not realize that the British had. Also, and I will tell you something, there's a name that people do not understand. And that name is a guy by the name of Tizard, Tizard. Look it up. This guy was amazing. The British had developed in their scientific areas. They had developed, sonar devices, torpedo range finding, microwave. They had developed all that stuff. You know what they did, that's why British to me will always be our friends. They took this Tizard guy and they put him on a ship in the middle of U-boat infested waters. They put him on this ship and they shipped him to the United States, where he shared the plans with the United States. And the United States later on were able to apply those plans because they had the money and the manufacturing to do it. And they defeated the U-boats probably, and I'm going to say probably because, there were a lot of other factors there, because of that technology. They were able to defeat the U-boat campaign. But Tizard is like this unsung hero. Nobody's ever heard of the guy. Tizard. And
okay, got
amazing.
it. Chris,
Yeah.
then I would go from the question of England involvement in Second World War and the reasons why it should have fought it for Poland, essentially. In my opinion, they were fighting for Poland because they knew that Poland is a target number one, but it's not the last one. That after Poland will fight, Hitler will fight other European nations, especially after Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Soviet Union. Obviously, he would turn against Europe. There was nothing else to go for him. So the next would be European countries like France and many others. And then it would be England itself. So England, just the alternative to fight Hitler, would be just sitting there and wait until Hitler will just take them over. Because by invading European countries and getting oil from Romania, getting everything what he needed, he would indeed defeat England. Yes, he did. He would defeat England.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a reason why England wanted to stop him at some point. Now, let me ask you this. What has today United States, what is their business to support Ukraine? Here's, especially if you consider that Putin alleged that Ukrainian and Russian people is actually the same people, and they have certain things just to figure out how to do and what to do and so on. Why U.S. is taking such a position? Essentially, the sanctions, what just Biden announced, they are crippling Russian economy, financial sector, everything. All Russian planes will stop. They already cannot fly anywhere to Europe, and they don't fly beside Europe anywhere. So now they closed actually their own 12 their own airports, especially on the south of the country. So people now stranded. The tourist groups are stranded in different countries in Europe, like in Moldavia, and they have no way to come back to Russia because no railway, no planes, passenger planes are available. Oh, guess what? Do you know that credit cards, Russian issued credit cards, cannot function abroad? So the people who are stranded now outside of Russia, who cannot come back to Russia, they cannot use their credit cards just as well. The Russian planes, which are Airbuses and Boeings, with a engine built by Rolls-Royce and the General Electric, guess what? They will not be able to service that. Now, on the previous shows, they were talk about somehow cripple Russian oil and gas industry. It's so easy, and it's already being implemented. There is embargo on all parts for oil and gas industry from Schlumberger, Halliburton, and others providers. And without that, there is no oil and gas industry. There will be no oil and gas to be supplied to anybody, even if they wanted to. So the war, now remember one thing, Russia will never ever be friends with the West. They are there to kill, dominate, destroy the West. All their propaganda through social media, through cyber attacks. Everything what they're doing is to destabilize the West, to make people grow apart from each other. And all this what's happening right now in America, in no less it's actions of Russian propaganda machine. And I'll tell you one thing: if Trump would stay in power for another 4 years, he would definitely dismantle NATO, and that was Russia wanted him to do. But guess what? He failed to get reelected, so it's not going to happen. So my question is then, what U.S. business is on a quarrel between Russia and Ukraine?
So I go back to 1991, where the 1991, what was our fight with Iraq based on them invading Kuwait? What did we care? Kuwait had 171 oil fields that would put Iraq basically thoroughly in charge of the oil production and a major player in OPEC. So, and that was interesting because Iran is a major player in OPEC. So Iraq and Iran would have actually been together in OPEC, which would have been hilarious. But the bottom line is, why did we do what we did, right? So when George H.W. Bush, when he said, look, we're going to go to the UN. So went to the UN and said, look, you can't invade Iraq. It's kind of interesting because the ambassador to Kuwait, or one of the ambassadors, I can't remember, a State Department person, and I don't know, I can't remember the name, was stated to have said, now she was appointed by George H.W. Bush. So of course the Democrats went nuts about this, but basically she said something like, hey, Saddam Hussein, if you invade Kuwait, we're not going to worry about that, because he said, look, Kuwait was actually part of Iraq. It was part of, down, again, history aspects, Babylonian aspects and all that. And, Iraq was part of that. And, this is what we have. So this really is our territory. So that they did the exact same thing that Putin just did. Now, here was the difference. The difference was we're talking about Iraq and we're talking about Russia. So now George H.W. Bush starts to put people in Saudi Arabia right along the Iraqi border. He puts tons of troops, 100,000 troops, right? Schwarzkopf says, look, this is what I need to defeat this guy. Give me 100,000 troops. I'm going to take his air power out in the first 24 hours. I remember seeing the helicopter video of them taking out the communication towers. I mean, they just took out every single one of the communication towers in about 2 hours. I mean, it was 2-3 hours. They were done. They couldn't communicate with anybody. And so he did that. Then he went in, they took the airfields, and that was pretty much it. I mean, they were done. We started taking prisoners.
Please, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, go ahead, please.
We have to finish the program pretty soon.
Of course.
I'm not so much interested in the war between United States and Iraq. Because that was a real war. There was overwhelming advantage of the United States and everywhere. There is so much difference between what's happened now between Russia and Ukraine. So it's hardly could be really applied to this case. My question is the same as reasons for England to care about Poland and going for actual war against Germany. And now what's happened between Russia and Ukraine and US is taking the most aggressive steps against Russia, the most aggressive ever in history, just outside war. Remember that Japan went for Second World War against states because there was embargo for oil products, right? So now Russia, when people already suffering, there were almost 2,000 people arrested for the demonstrations in Russia against the war. This war is extremely unpopular, and the more resistance Ukrainians will muster against Russia, which they do. I was yesterday in a bank in Toronto. There were a line of people to transfer money to support Ukrainian army. People were sending, and nobody sent less than $200. Some people were sending $3,500. Some people were sending $500, $700, and so on and on and on. There was a multi-type 100,000 demonstration right in the center of Toronto against Russia. Get out of Ukraine.
Same here.
Do you think that in this environment, when I saw former president just half an hour ago, former president Poroshenko, who was unpopular in the last few years of his presidency, and Zelensky beat him. Yet Poroshenko, with a Kalashnikov in his hand, he joined the brigade to fight against Russia. And he said that I will fight with Kalashnikov in my hand. And if I will not have Kalashnikov, I have a baseball bar and I will fight with my bare hands. Now, so is most of the population of Ukraine are really of that mind. How, even if he will take over Kiev, how he is going to, by the way, on the grounds, he's not using pure Russian army, he's using Chechen army, who are Muslims. And if Russians fighting against Ukraine, there is one Russian battalion who gave up to Ukrainians, and they said that they're not going to shoot at Ukrainians. Now, Chechens, on the other hand, they would be extremely happy to kill Russians and Ukrainians.
They don't care.
They're all the same. It will be great pleasure to kill both of those. So this is a situation, and I'm asking one more time, what America has business in this, and why are they supporting Ukraine so openly and so aggressively?
Well, first of all, yeah. Well, I'll tell you why they're doing it. It's because we always go after the underdog. The underdog for us is something that we need to support. Ukraine is the underdog. We've always supported that. We just do that. When Britain took over, or when Britain fought Argentina, we were solely behind Britain on that. I mean, it's always the underdog.
Was British underdog?
Yeah, no, but the Maldives were. So we were like, hey, we're four square behind making sure the Maldives are free and democratic, not under Argentina. Argentina was not a democratic country at that point in time. It was a paramilitary organization that was running Argentina. So that's where we're always trying to push the democratic aspect. And Russia to us is not a democracy. It's, yes, you can pull that, yeah, you got the parliament and all that stuff, but that's all facade. The bottom line is that's why we're there. We're there to try to halt communism's takeover of Europe, just like we did in the 1950s, just like we did, with the Berlin blockade, all that stuff. That's why we're there.
Well, before we finish, the latest news, what I heard is that there are personal sanctions offered now by European Union against Mr. Putin and Mr. Lavrov. All their personal property accounts, everything is frozen, number one. And number two, news is that from now on, Russian diplomats cannot use their diplomatic passports to freely travel in European Union. And the only two diplomats who are allowed to travel, I'm not sure that they wanted to travel, is again Mr. Putin and Mr. Lavrov. Maybe they will travel to hire lawyers to unfreeze their bank accounts and properties or so on. Welcome to a new brave world. Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
we'll see you on Tuesday to discuss the further developments. Bye-bye, everybody.